So I wanted to start off, like I said, in I want to start off, like I said, with looking at Eusebius. But first of all, we were doing the background a little bit, and how far down in the history did we get? Got down to the Maccabean period? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we traced the history down from the beginning of time to the Maccabean period. So what is the Maccabean period primarily noted for? Well, it's a freedom struggle, a national liberation struggle. That's really what the Jewish festival of Hanukkah is about. Hanukkah is their commemoration even to the modern period. It's very weird that they would be commemorating a military victory 2,200 years later or so. And that's one of the problems with Hanukkah, actually. I'll write it on the board here where the Jews are concerned. I think, you know, when you're trying to culturally survive as a people or a culture, you have to have symbols that are meaningful to your constituents as opposed to symbols of other people who are in a democratic melting pot pulling on them, right? So a festival that has meaning, it's very difficult to get a military victory against Greek expansionist forces in the 2nd century BC to be meaningful to a person in the 21st century. It's very difficult. And that's because some of the larger aspects of the holiday or commemoration, if you want to call it, are mistaken or missed. And for our purposes, it's very important for the Jesus event and what happens after that in Christian origins to understand the ethos of the country and what was going on, because you really can't understand if you just portray a church and Peter, Paul, John, other successor figures, individuals to the Jesus story or event, whether it's historical or not, semi-historical, however you see it. You're operating in a vacuum. You're not really operating in a real world. I mean, if you were to do modern history, you know, if you didn't understand what was happening in the Palestine Liberation Organization, in Ramallah, in Tel Aviv, in Beersheba, in Iran and places, I mean, how would you be able to focus on a religious movement and its connection with the period and environment in which it grew out of? It would be impossible. And I think that's the first shortcoming that you'll find when you encounter people who feel close to these traditions. The very real historical dearth or lack that they have. There's a huge, what we call, lacuna there. They really, I mean, it's the same in Islam too. For Muslims, history begins with Muhammad's appearance. And they were not interested in anything that came before that, except insofar as to have a mythological understanding of Abraham or someone like that, but that's an event that would be 3,000 years earlier. I mean, what, I'm going to base myself on something that happened in the time of Ramesses, the Emperor of Egypt in California. I'm going to do that. I mean, you could in California actually, but it's not. It's that really unrealistic, absurd, preposterous, if you want. So it's really important to know the times, and I teach Islam classes, so I try to explain to Muslim believers, people in that tradition, outsiders, what was going on in the Arabian Peninsula at the time of the coming or birth of the prophet, what the forces were, what the groups that were there beforehand, what they represented, what had produced the situation in which he came. And it's really amazing how little interest the people who are a part of these religious traditions have in that. And yet I think it is crucially important for evaluating it. So in our point in this class, even though we're doing Christian origins, in particular the Paul and James dispute, which I think is the focus of what you can do with Christian origins in the first century. I don't want to go much beyond the first century. You have to know something of what came before. And the Maccabean struggle that we mentioned, we brought history down to the Maccabean struggle. Hanukkah is extremely important. I've always theorized that even the date of Christmas, December 25th, might have something to do with the Maccabean struggle. Even though everyone knows that it's taken to some extent from a Roman festival, I think it was called the Saturnalia, when the, I don't know what the god Saturn was, but I think when the sun was supposed to have been in the underworld and it was about to achieve a new birth or something, some Roman festival in midwinter that was to commemorate that was transferred into the birth date of Jesus, because even in the Gospels it's quite clear that Jesus is not born in the middle of winter. I mean, there's lambs and different things like that skipping around in there. Whether those stories are historical, I don't know, but I don't think anyone knows the date of Jesus' birth, or whether it was in the spring, summer, winter, or whatever. But these are Roman determinations that were made as the history, as the church grew up in a Roman framework, particularly in the Roman church, as it's so called, under the Roman imperial tutelage. So these festivals were transferred from a pagan, if you like, environment over to a Christian environment. But it always, I don't even know if the Saturnalia was the 25th. It was more, you know, the change of the equinoxes is around the 22nd, isn't it? 21st or the 22nd. And I'd have to do some research on the Roman festivals related to the equinoxes to apprise myself of that. You could do a paper on that subject, I guess. But, you know, it's clear in the Maccabean text that the Maccabean festival is the 25th of Kislev, as they say, the 25th of Kislev. So I always question whether the very 25 number had something to do with the determination of Christmas in a Roman sphere. It may have nothing to do with it. It's just something running around in my head as a possibility. And that's why I throw it out to you as something to think about if you think it's worth it, or you think it bears considering any further than that, just to know. And what's Kislev? Kislev was the Jewish 12th month. So it really was the December period. And that's why Hanukkah and Christmas are almost at the same time always. Just that the Jews have a more lunar-related calendar, a solar lunar calendar that has consequences both for the lunar cycle and the solar cycle. So therefore, Hanukkah will change dates in the framework of the Western Christian calendar. So sometimes it'll be the early part of December, sometimes it'll be the middle of December, sometimes it'll be a little closer to Christmas. It's the same as these festivals we're coming into now in Judaism. You know, the Muslims have a holy month. It's the month of Ramadan, which is what month? The 8th month. The 8th month of the Muslim calendar. But it moves, because even more so than the Jewish calendar, the Muslim calendar is totally lunar. So therefore, their year is not intercalculated into a solar year. I know I'm boring you with this, but it's interesting to know why these things move. It turns out that the Muslim calendar is about, in order to, I think it gains 3 years a century. So you can figure out how fast it's, how many days it's missed.